Hey guys, welcome back for another video from Community Starcraft 2. I am Magnet, and I'm the person that's making this video today, and you are the person watching it today. So, as you can see on the screen, we are going to be learning a little bit about ZvT today. And like I've done in the past, we're just going to go over some replays, and I'm going to talk about what they do in these replays that you can mimic yourself, or what to look out for in your own game. And I'm sorry, I made a very unwise decision of starting this video without having water next to me, so I apologize if I'm a little raspy, but we'll get this going as soon as possible. But basically all you need to know is that we're going to be talking about ZvT, we're going to be looking at some good players play, and we're going to be focusing on different aspects of the game that you need to pay attention to if you want to be successful in your own ZvT games. So without any further ado, let's stop wasting any more time and jump into the game. And we'll just go ahead and start this replay. As you can see, these two players are just people that I don't really have too much experience with. One is a Barcode, the other one is from a good team called Dust. We're going to obviously be focusing on the Zerg here, since this is just a ZvT tutorial. And let me make sure that I am not messing stuff up. Okay. I just recently did all my hotkeys again, so I need to double check that. Now, as far as openers here, what you're going to see almost all the time is hatch first in ZvT. Because there's not much of a reason not to. And what I would actually recommend to do, rather than what this player did, is make your pool right after you put your hatchery down, just in case you're getting proxied or something crazy like that. But you can usually go pool, add on a drone or two, take your gas, and then keep going on as usual. The idea is that you can get the hatchery down early, but if you make too many drones between the hatchery and the time that you put your pool down, you could be in some trouble due to not having that done quickly enough. Now, the other side of things is that you do want to scout, you want to figure out what the Terran opponent is doing. And in this event, he saw the Terran opening command center first. So this is a super fast command center. His response is actually just going to be to take a third expansion. So you can always do that. If the Terran takes a quick expansion right away, you can take your third right away, and you should be okay. Now, I'm going to pre-warn you and spoil this a little bit for you, in the sense that this replay is mostly going to be about mistakes that the Zerg makes, so that you can eliminate those mistakes from your own gameplay. And then we'll look at two more a little later, wherein the Zerg player plays better and actually wins the game because of the decisions that they make and because of the moves that they make. But I want to start out with just a general opener and show you that if you don't do the things that I'm talking about, you're going to get yourself in some trouble. One thing that he does do well is that as soon as your pool is done, you want to start queens on your hatcheries. There's a little bit of a transition phase, and I'll even show you in just a second as soon as we can look at the Terran base, and it'll more demonstrate my point. But what the Terran, almost every single Terran is going to do is something like this. They're going to have a reactor done, and they're going to put a factory down, and they're going to start making Hellions, and sometimes they're supported by Banshees. You need to find a way to stop these Hellions, and there's two schools of thought on this so far. The one school of thought is just to make a lot of queens and get your creep connected. So that you can move your queens around and just deal with it that way, because queens have more of a long-term application against those. The other thing you can do is make a roach warren, and just a handful of roaches will do well enough against the Hellions. Then you can clean up the Banshees with spores and a couple queens here and there. But the problem with this is that if he wants to hold off any sort of Hellion timing or Banshee timing or something like that, he needs to start putting creep termers down and start connecting his bases. So you'll see at what point that he needs to worry about that and when it's going to start to hurt him. Now that the Hellions are coming across the map, you can see that the Zerglings just don't do anything against these guys, and they have free reign to just walk in and do whatever they want. And that's really not somewhere you want to be. Fortunately, the Zerg player got a little bit lucky in the sense that the Terran just kind of walked into his death there. But he has no idea this Banshee transition is coming because he has not scouted. So by this time, maybe even a minute earlier, I'd say about 7 minutes, you want to start moving your Overlord around and even losing it just at the cost of knowing what's going on. Because all this Overlord sees right now is just the fact that there's mining going on here, which is no big surprise, and that's basically it. He doesn't know anything about the cloak that's going down on the Banshees. He doesn't know about the Hellions being started. I mean, obviously he does now because he saw them attacking his base. He has no idea there's a third command center on the way, and this is a really rough way to play. Yeah, he has a decent drone count. He's up by a handful, but those are going to be gone right away just because he's not scouting. So that's one big problem that we're seeing in this game. So let's go ahead and resume here. Now here's the problem. If you get enough Banshees and Hellions, say, up at this third base, where's the creep for your queens? Your queens are never, ever going to get over there in time. And quite honestly, these should have been connected a long time ago. There hasn't even been a single tumor placed this game. And that is a big, big problem if you're relying on queens to stop these Banshee and Hellion openers. So I'd say if you don't have the attention span to get your creep tumors going, open Roach instead. Maybe 8 roaches. Don't go too crazy on them. Just 8 roaches, a handful of queens, and some spores here and there just to make sure you don't die to Banshees. But all of a sudden, I mean, the Banshees haven't even done anything, and the worker count is, for all intents and purposes, pretty much even at this point. So, I mean, you can see that the Zerg player is really not in a very good position right now. And this Banshee can almost do whatever it wants, because there's only going to be 1 queen over here. As soon as she gets a little bit of help from her buddies, then that'll be it. The one thing that the Zerg player does do to kind of follow this up is it does make a whole bunch of lings, knowing that the Hellion Banshee timing could be something that he'll have a hard time dealing with. But if the Hellions try to come down here, the lings will push them away. But this also means that this is just dead larva that is not being spent on drones right now. And right now the worker count is only different by 6. Typically as Zerg, your whole goal is that you're going to want to make as many drones as possible without making it kill you. So you want to get as many drones out as soon as you possibly can, and then you want to be able to have the larva and the production and the queens and stuff to make an army when you absolutely need it. Right now, these Zerglings are basically useless. All they're doing is just preventing Hellions from moving out, which I'm sure we will see in a little while. But yeah, so those are things you definitely want to pay attention to in the opening stages of the game. You can see here's the Zerglings pushing away the Hellions now. But all of a sudden, now the Banshees are out, and now the Hellions are out, so these Lings actually didn't even do what they were supposed to. So, I mean, this is a pretty scary little timing barreling down on the third base here, and you're going to see this all the time in this matchup, and you need a solution to this. You can't just kind of do whatever and hope it's going to work out, because you're going to die most of the time if that happens, or at least take damage to the point where it makes it totally not worth it. Now we finally see Roachhorn coming down. But at this point, it's just not going to do anything against his push. You can see all those Zerglings came up, and he just lost a ton of Zerglings right there. Like, this is probably maybe a third or less of the force that he had out, and I don't even think he killed a single Hellion. So you can see that the Zerglings just don't demand enough position to figure out, or rather to stop these things. So here we go. The creep is finally getting connected, and there's no way you're ever going to hold a base like this because there's no creep out here. So you can't pull your queens, you can't do anything to deal with that. You're just going to have to cancel it. And yeah, there it goes. But yeah, this is going to start getting more and more annoying. Here comes the push again, and look at this. The Hellions have fantastic position on these Zerglings. There's no way these Zerglings are ever going to do anything to these Hellions. There's now 3 Banshees out. If he wasn't careful, he could actually just lose this base, and that's basically game over. So, Zerglings do come down, try and stop the Hellions. Still, though, I mean, if these Banshees really wanted to, look how many drone kills they're getting now. Finally, the Roaches are out, but at this point, what's the point? Like, you're already behind in workers, and there's Banshees on the field that you can't deal with, all because you didn't bother to connect your creep, and all because you didn't bother to make any extra queens. If you just made extra queens and had these creep connected, this would not spiral this far out of control this quickly. Of course, the other side of it is that if he did have faster roaches, he wouldn't have spiraled out of control this quickly either. The other side of this is that if you really want to find another solution to deal with this, you are always eventually going to get into Spire anyway, as Zerg. There's no reason not to go Spire in this matchup. I mean, you can try Roach Hydra, but it just scales so poorly in the late game. If you can get a fast enough Spire to push this kind of stuff away, you can deal with it, but that's just, I don't know, that's a little bit too heavy of a commitment to be flexible and to transition into a lot of other things, because you realistically can't start mining gas as Zerg unless your bases are almost all the way filled up. Aside from your first gas, obviously, to get Zergling speed. But, yeah, so you need to find a solution for these little timings. And this Zerg just did not find a solution. This Terran has done exactly what he wanted to, and that's a big, big problem. So, from the Terran perspective, let's look at it from his perspective. He just opened Hellion Banshee. He's going into mech. He's in a good spot here because the worker count's pretty much even. He has a third base that he can take basically uncontested right now. And the worker count, like I said, is in his favor, and that's somewhere you never, ever, ever, ever want to be at if you're a Zerg player. You always want to have the worker advantage, and you always want to have the tempo advantage, and frankly, the Zerg player has neither of those right now. So, in desperation, he's going to try a little bit of run-bys right here, but I mean, honestly, this really shouldn't do too much if he was, you know, controlling all of his workers correctly, or at least had a decent amount of Banshees to push this away. So the Zerg does get a little bit fortunate in the sense that he does come back from this and he can stabilize, but you can see those Roaches just evaporate. Now the Zerg's behind in supply, and now the Mutas are on the way, but the Mutas are barely going to be able to to be able to stop this, and he's still going to take way more damage than he should from an attack like this. So you can see that over time, if you don't deal with this kind of stuff, it's going to just get out of control. So yeah, another set of attacks here coming up, Overseer's coming up, but the one thing that he does well in this timing is that the mutas come out and they have to deal with Thors. You always want to make sure to spread your Mutalisks out like this against Thors, because the Thors do splash damage against air by default. But if you spread them out to the point where the Thors are only hitting maybe one muta at a time, then you can deal with the Thors fairly cost efficiently. So anytime you attack against Thors, always just move your muta clump in and then stop them using the stop command or even the hold position command to be sure that they don't take too much damage from Thors. So he does just barely clean this up, but I mean, where's all of his stuff over here? He could even still lose this base if he's not careful, but fortunately the Banshees don't cloak, and at least they do at the last second. But, so okay, now we're looking back at this game and we're saying, okay, well, I don't know, I think the Zerg is actually in a pretty decent position. The supply favors him. The workers aren't too out of control. He is ahead by just a little bit. So the Spire definitely does have its uses. But I feel like he did get fortunate by having that Terran move out into a point where, hoping that the Zerg just didn't have mutas, because if the Zerg does have mutas, he's going to stop that. So that's basically the one thing that's gone right for the Zerg this whole game. And you can see it did put him in a little bit of a supply lead, but as far as tech, there's 2-2 mech coming down, and the upgrades for the Lings are non-existent. The upgrades for mutas just barely started, so you can see there's still ways in which the Zerg player is behind. If you're behind like this, you want to see what you can get with your little groups of units and see if you can trade well. Now there's so many turrets here and there's so few mutas that there's really no chance that this is going to work out in his favor. Now, one thing I do want to talk about is the fact that mech is a very real possibility all the time. And the thing with mech is that they just get these huge, scary armies that are so hard to engage into. You need to find a solution to dealing with those, and almost always just making stuff and attacking at them is not going to work, which is what we're going to see in this game. However, if you decide to make roaches, and if you can find other ways to deal with this, you can drop on top of armies like this and actually trade pretty well. Or the other side of it is that you need to be in an economic position where you can just throw army after army at him and keep his mech army kind of reset the whole game. Little attacks like this, again, are not going to do anything. So you can see that just because he got this far behind, all of a sudden the mech ball is getting really, really scary, and stopping this is going to be really hard. You can try cute little things like Zergling run-bys, but if they just have enough defense set up, they're going to be able to stop that. We'll see a little bit later of Zerg that actually does that really well and does a lot of damage with those kind of timings. But yeah, I mean, this game, there's not too much else to say. I just want to demonstrate that if you get behind throughout the game, and especially against mech, if you can't trade with them throughout the game, you're going to lose so much, and it's going to be such a hard army to stop at some point in the game. Little counterattack once again, but I mean, these roaches are doing basically nothing. The army supply for Terran is just enormous at this point. And now all of a sudden the Terran realizes, oh, okay, well, you just donated a whole bunch of your army. You've been behind an economy the whole game. If I just attack you, you should die. Secret Risk is trying to come down, but that's not going to work out. So yeah, pressing forward in this, there's not a whole lot to say. I mean, the Zerg is pretty desperate at this point, trying to get into some other type of tech. But like I said, the only thing I really want to demonstrate is how bad of shape you're going to be in if you don't deal with those early game timings. Because that was really the only point in which the Terran got an advantage, and he just carried it throughout the game. We're going to watch a lot of Zerg stuff die, which I'm sure you don't want to see in this video, so just take my word for it that he's dead. And I know he's dead because, number one, I've seen the replay before, but number two, just the upgrades are so awful for Zerg, and if you don't reset a mech ball and you let them just attack into you like that without any real solution to deal with it, such as roach drops or even just a huge cloud of mutas that you can deal with them with, or swarm hosts or something like that, then you're in a lot of trouble. Let's jump into the next game here. This is Zerg Zingzing, who's a good friend of mine. He is playing on Korea against, I think you say Sinai. He used to be a pro gamer in Korea, but he has recently retired, but apparently still plays. So, yeah, this is a pretty high-level match as well. But I'm going to show you a little bit different application of this. Zerg Zingzing is going to open pretty much the same way that the last player did, just because he's on such a big map and you can figure that the opponent will be going for command center first or something that's fairly passive. There are risks associated with this, and we'll talk about that. So First hatch goes down, he's actually going to do 2 hatches before pool, which is super, super risky. You can get away with it if you know how to handle this kind of thing, but it's only on huge maps, like maybe this one, Crossbond and Alter Zeme are probably the only 2 you can just do it and feel pretty safe. It's going to work this game because he goes Command Center first, but if the Terran opened Reaper, you'd have a really big problem on your hands, and especially at this third base. I mean, there'd be no way you could ever get queens down there in time to deal with that. But we'll see how this game progresses and show you how this can work if you get the right circumstances. Now, Zing plays a very interesting style, especially in ZvT, in the sense that he just plays a style where he accepts his economic lead and just decides to defend himself the whole game. That's pretty much all he does. There are a couple of different ways of doing ZvT, but this is one of the safer ways to do it, especially if you're trying to get better just at the game. Throughout the game, of course, the most important thing is keeping up on your larva injects, which we've talked about in other videos. But if you keep up on your larva injects and you get good engagements, and you constantly are taking bases and just defending their attacks, and eventually you should get to a point where you have the game in your hands. And we'll see that tipping point here in this game from Zing. So one cool thing that he does is he just puts a blind spine down here at his third base, just knowing, okay, there's basically no reason for you not to open Hellion or something else that's involved with that, and you can't see that the Hellions are now out. But the focus of the attacks from the Terran are going to be on this third base because it's going to be pretty hard to start connecting creep here. So if you just go ahead and drop a blind spine, and you don't care, and you just put it there, and you just say, okay, well, I'm probably going to get attacked here, but this spine crawler and this queen, maybe a second one, are going to do pretty well against these early little timings. And of course, like we were talking about before, your first priority, once you start to get your larva stabilized and start to get mining and extra queens out on the field, is you want to start connecting this creep as soon as you can to your extra bases so you can move your queens around. So we will see what he does with that. Now, something I've been glossing over, but something I do talk about in the build order videos, is that Zergling speed is the most important upgrade probably in the game for Zerg. If you have slow lings, you're never going to be able to do anything, so just get Zergling speed as soon as you can once you start mining gas here at your main. And we talked about the timing there before. Basically, as soon as your pool goes down, just start your gas right after. And here come the creep tumors, starting to connect them just a little bit. You can see that they're not going to be connected too soon, but there's really only 6 Hellions out. 2 queens and the 1 spine here are going to be more than enough. Just try to keep your drones alive, but they shouldn't do pretty much anything at these bases. The only one scary thing that you will have to worry about in situations like this is that, yeah, you might have the queens out that can push away the Hellions. They can transfuse each other. You know, that's great, cool. But the problem is that if they do something like 2 factory Blue Flame Hellion, and they just walk into your main and natural, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So what I'd really like to see are buildings maybe right here, and then a queen on hold position that just wall this off to prevent it from taking too much damage. So that the only place you really have to keep constantly focused on is this third base, and your other 2 bases are basically safe because you're effectively walled in. Excuse me. So you can see the Hellions are pretty much defeated. They're going to go home, and all Zing has to do at this point is start his upgrades. Upgrades are a huge deal, especially against Bio, which is what this Terran player is going to be doing this game. So if you get too far behind on upgrades, all of a sudden Marines are going to be basically unstoppable. So you want to get double upgrades as fast as you can if you're dealing with Bio. I'd even say just in general, do double upgrades as much as you possibly can. And then focus on just defending for quite a while, and this will train you for longer games in which you have more to worry about and more to do. You obviously do want to scout to see what the Terran's third base timing is looking like. And he knows at this point now that he's seen this third base, he can figure, well, there's probably not going to be some big Hellion or Banshee timing or anything like that coming my way, because he's going to be more worried about focusing on what to do with this 3-base economy. And 3-base Banshee Hellion is really not a thing. So the transition, of course, as we talked about, is just going to be into straight up Bio, maybe mixing in some other stuff like Hellbats or Mines or whatnot, but we'll have to see. Now, Baneling speed is very important against Bio. You want to get that basically as soon as your lair is done, just because the Banelings need to engage and they need to hit Marines well. And if you're using slow Banelings, they can micro against those pretty much all day. So the Spire timing's coming up, like we talked about before. Try to keep up on your upgrades the best you can, so you'd stay even in upgrades. And then we'll start seeing fights develop a little bit later in this game. As you can see, the first push from Terran is starting to move across the map. And the fact that he'll have Baneling speed pretty much by the time this attack is going to get there should mean that he's going to be fine against it. But you want to try and do your best as far as keeping containment on where this army is. But yeah, we'll see what's going on. The other things that I have to criticize just a little bit is the fact that there's not much scouting going on here from the Zerg once again. So he's playing pretty blind. He can't even see anything in the main. But I think he should know by now, because I think he's lost a couple of units to Marines, that it is just going to be a regular bio play and not mech. Considering you need to react pretty much totally differently between the both of them. So, yeah, so more upgrades coming down. Spire is now done. Baneling speed is almost done, and there's an attack barreling down on the now 4th base. So we'll see how he deals with this. He obviously sees it coming because he just lost an Oak Lord, so that's kind of a big deal. Here comes the attack, and now there's just so much stuff here. And all he wants to do is just stop armies like this. He just doesn't want to take damage. In the meantime, he is getting hit by Hellions over here on the side, but again, Queen sitting over here and the Spine will mitigate damage as much as possible. So these really should not do too much at all. Yeah, you can see they just basically die for nothing. So the drops are going to keep commencing here, and this is one of the biggest reasons you want Spire, is because there's nothing stopping them from just picking up in these medevacs and flying back over there and re-dropping somewhere else, since you're going to mostly have Zerglings. But the mutas will kind of put an expiration date on that, in the sense that they will track down the medevacs and they'll be able to end the drops rather than keep them going over and over. So you might find yourself thinking, well, if they just have Marines, I mean, I could probably just go Ling Baneling and just blow up the Marines and not care. But the fact of the matter is that once you play better players, they're going to start doing really annoying drop tactics, and they're going to be dropping you over and over and over, and you need some way to stop that. So yeah, you can see that the drops pretty much, he knows it's pretty much over because the mutas are in pursuit. So, okay, cool. Attack number 1 basically stopped from Zing Zing, and that's his goal, just to not die throughout the game. So in the meantime, he's not going to get too aggressive because he knows that all the fights are going to be taking place pretty much on my end of the map, where all this creep is. And the extension of the creep is a big deal because you can see pushes coming from further away, and all of your units that are on the ground are going to get speed bonuses. So he's just accepting his speed bonus, accepting an economic lead, and just saying, alright, well, I'll just get better trades throughout the game until a point where I get such a good trade that you can't stop my counterattack. So here's the second little push coming out here, and he has plenty of stuff to deal with that, assuming he engages correctly. We'll talk about here in just a second as soon as we see this happen. The Terran is going to be a little bit annoying about stopping your creep here, so you will want to re-creep up as soon as you can. So the attack is coming down now, and the one thing that you want to focus on is make sure that your Banelings are away from splash as much as possible, and try to not just A-move them, because if you just A-move them and say there's a Thor standing right here, they're going to all blow up on the Thor and they're all just going to be wasted. So when you attack, you typically would just want to let stuff attack, but just select your Banelings. You can just control-click. As you can see, if I just control-click, it'll grab your Banelings and just move them around and let them die and kind of hug up against stuff. And they'll choose the targets for you the best way they possibly can. If all you do is just click them around, you know, it's just your regular click rather than an attack move. So you'll see the Banelings kind of just pilfer in a little bit and blow up the stuff that they need to rather than getting wasted on bad trades. The Terran does do a good job of pulling back right here, and the Banelings, you can see, are getting better connections because he's not just A-moving them, he's actually trying to move them into clumps of units. So he defeats that push. Okay, cool. Push number 2 stopped. There is a re-rally here from the Terran player trying to gather up more and more. And the only reason that he's able to continue to push these back is because he has really good larva injects. So, like we talked about in the mechanics video, you want to make sure that you are injecting as much as possible, because if you ever get to a point where you can't make stuff because you have no larva and there's an attack barreling down on you, well, you're dead. And if you need to, you can make extra hatcheries around the map just for that larva production if you can't keep up on your injects. It doesn't matter if you are injecting poorly, as long as you're spending your money is the biggest deal. So here's another attack. Again, the Banelings are just on a little bit of a move command. He is controlling them individually and trying to get the best trades possible. And you can see he squashes that attack once again. There's another Thor, and like we talked about, don't flip your mutas up if you can. It's not as big of a deal because it's only one Thor. And he's just going to continue to push this back. He's going to continue to move his army to get in the best surrounding and Baneling explosion positions possible. And now that he gets this far, he can start to test the waters and say, okay, well, what do you have? Let me see if you're able to remax, but ultimately the safer decision is just to go back home. He does have to deal with little drops like this, but since he has creep and since he has all kinds of mutas and stuff out, he can deal with these pretty well without taking too much damage. But yeah, so again, we're just continuing to not die. We're continuing just to inject and make stuff and keep up on our upgrades. So you can see the Terran upgrades are starting to get a little bit out of control. 3-3 is on the way, and that's really scary for Marines. But 2-2 is done here for Zing. So as soon as he starts his hive and continues the upgrades going, then he'll be in good shape. But there is a little bit of a scary timing around the 3-3 for Terran, that they'll be really strong, and you're probably going to be a set of upgrades behind because getting to hive is so hard. So let me speed this up just a little bit. We'll watch the next fight here. Now Zing does see this army approaching, and he's just going to say, okay, I know my army's better than that if I just engage properly, so I'm just going to go for it and see what happens. So we'll see what happens here. And again, you want to. This is a good example of a point where if he just turned around and attacked, and you just let these banelings hit whatever they wanted, they'd probably just all detonate on the Thor, and that's a huge waste. Let me see if he actually does that. You can see he does a little bit. I think some of those banelings actually died, but the idea that you want to get here with your banelings is just move them along his army so that when they blow up what they need to. He's going to continue to engage here. You don't want to lose too many meters if you can help it, so try to get your banelings under control. The banelings are coming in here, crashing in pretty well, and once again, he deflected an attack. And notice how the series of attacks here, we can go back and just remember them all. First attack happened here, the second attack happened right around here, there was another attack that happened right around here, and then there was another one that started here and ended here. So over the course of the game, he's starting to push the Terran attacks further and further back until there's a point where the attacks are now starting to happen in his base. So this is a really interesting, a safe style to run if you want to get better at ZvT. Now all of a sudden the attacks have gone so far that he can start killing workers at this fourth base and try to keep his opponent down on economy the best he can. Obviously you don't want to lose any mutas, so just get him out of there as soon as you start to get attacked. But the supplies now in favor of the Zerg by quite a bit. Plus 2 muta upgrades are on the way. Hive is getting started, so he can start the 3-3 for his Lings and Banelings. Mutas are going to be able to come around here and swing around, kill all these drops. So one thing you do want to be aware of, whoops, he's actually attacking his own extractor. There we go. Is that if you need to clean up drops like this, you probably want to separate your mutas on their own hotkey. So you can see most of these are just on the one hotkey for Zing. So that if he has a drop, he can just hit a hotkey and send his mutas over there to deal with it, and he'll be fine. So more stuff coming out here for the Terran. He's starting to mix in Hellbats and Thors, in addition to his Marines and Marauders. So pretty diverse unit composition here. We'll have to just wait for the next fight since we've basically stressed everything that needs to happen. But then we can start seeing the win condition for this build. You might say, yeah, I can trade all day against these guys, and what's the end goal? Well, the end goal is eventually just to get to a point where you squash him so hard that he just can't recover. And the other side of it is that if you can find times to start getting little counterattacks done with these Mutalisks, especially on open bases like this, then that'll be a big win for you. Let's check out this next fight here and see what he does to deal with this. Now one thing you do want to do, notice how he's not pulling everything that he has all at once, because if there's happens to be mines here that you don't know about and you run your whole army in, it's just all going to get blown up by mines. So if you can help it, try to attack with small little groups at a time. Maybe 5 or 6 Banelings, maybe a handful of Zerglings, just send them in and see what you can get done. If you don't see any mines there, then you can just go ahead and crash on through. So here comes the little groups of units. Notice the Baneling connections are as good as possible, trying to spread them out as much as he can, and just letting them kind of walk into wherever they want to, or rather, letting them walk in rather than just detonate on anything. So it looks like Zing is just in a little bit of trouble, but the muta count is so high and their upgrades are good enough to the point where he can just clean the rest of this up. And there we go. There's another attack squashed on this side of the map. He's not squashing attacks in here. He doesn't have to fall all the way back to his base. He's doing fine, squashing attacks kind of in the middle of the map. And again, there's another drop. You notice what's going on. Send your mutas over there to deal with it. So he'll kill this drop, no problem. And at this point, Zing's starting to think about his victory condition. Obviously, you can stay on Mutiling Bane for basically the whole game, but now he's starting to say, well, I've beat you back so many times, and I know that your main is starting to mine out because of the timing in the game. So I'm going to try to start to hurt you economically and just try to stop your pushes with as minimal units as possible. So what he's going to do is he's going to send his mutas over here, and he's going to try to deal as much damage as possible. And now that the Terran army is kind of out on the map, they're in an awkward position where they have to decide to either come back or just keep going. So you get all this free time where you can attack this command center, you can try to get it, you can just fly away if you need to, but just try to save as many mutas as you can and do what you can. He does eventually get it and then just fly out of there. So that's a big win for him. Now all of a sudden the Terran is basically mining on half a base and then a little more than half a base here. He's even mining gas here. So the Terran is basically reduced down to 1.5 bases worth of mining since this one's mined out. And again, just being annoying. He knows the army's starting to move out once again because he can see it with his creep, so he just says, okay, I'll just deny this again. Now what are you going to do? Are you going to stay across the map, or are you going to come back and deal with this? Because you can't do this forever. If you try to come back and do this over and over, then you're just never going to get to a point where you can ever attack me, and I'll just get trades all day. So what's happening on the other side of the map is the Terran just saying, alright, well I need to equalize this somehow. I'll just try to take this down the best I can. Meanwhile, the Mutalisks are just killing everything. Look how many depots are being lost here for the Terran. He is going to lose a base of his own, but that's okay. I mean, he's still mining basically on 2.5 bases right now. He could take this third, which he's actually doing. And then, at this point, you need to decide when to reunite your army and when you're going to be able to kill this army for the Terran. Look how many Banelings are in here, though. And just this many Banelings alone, if they're controlled well and they don't die to like tanks or Widow Mines or something, they'll just basically end the game for you. So we should see a final battle here in just a second. You can see that over time, he's won basically every fight he's been in because he's just been waiting for the Terran to attack into him. So as soon as this comes up, here we go, huge surround on everything. We'll just slow it down so you can see the glory of Terran dying. And you notice that his Banelings are not blowing up on anything too wasteful. He goes right around the Thors and he just focuses on the Marines. So look at the supplies now. It's almost a 70 supply lead for Zing Zing. That basically ends the game. So yeah, that's really a style that you're going to want to run if you just want to get better at ZvT. It just relies on you being able to make good decisions with your army, squash attack after attack, and keep up on, you know, drones, larva injects, stuff like that. And these players make it look easy as far as keeping up on their army, but it's actually a lot harder than it seems. So, long story short, focus on your injects, focus on your upgrades, focus on finding opportunities where you can squash Terran attacks, and then just eventually you'll get so far ahead that you'll be able to just walk into his base and kill him, which was the next step in that game, but we didn't see it because we saw the final fight and we demonstrated what we need to. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is a player named Starbuck. He's a good European Zerg. And these guys just talking a little bit about who knows what. This is going to be a little bit of a different style. He's not just going to accept attacks in this game, but rather he's going to go for a little more risky and a little more reward-based style of counterattacks. And I'll show you those as they come up. Now once again, hatch first, no reason not to do that. And you want to figure out what the Terran is doing, but this is a smaller map, so there's not much of a reason to go for a second hatch before pool. And he's being even a little bit greedy, getting gas and extra drones before finally dropping his pool. But these guys might know each other, I'm not sure. He might just figure that he wants to practice this way anyway, so even if he gets cheesed, he just doesn't really care. So the Overlord's going to come in here and see what's going on. A really common opener is actually this Reaper opener here. And this is going to stress the importance of getting that pool up on time and getting queens out of your hatcheries on time. Because you might, I mean, if you let this get too far out of control, these Reapers aren't supposed to do anything other than just scout and force the Zerg to make stuff. Like we were talking about in Game 1. The only objective the Terran has from the start is, that's a nice little surround. The only objective the Terran has from the start is trying to keep the Zerg under control in terms of keeping their third base down and keeping their drone count down as much as possible while they get their own stuff up. So the first Reaper was lost. That's a really big win for the Zerg. The second Reaper grabs a couple of kills here, but eventually I don't think this Reaper is going to do too much. The other side of this, though, is that the counterattacks begin. The Zerg knows that there's going to be Reapers and stuff out on the map. The transition into Hellions is a little bit slow because the command center's probably already going to be started. So he's going to start seeing what he can get with these Zergling packs. And this is going to be a recurring theme throughout this game, so we'll pay attention to that. But the Reapers in here, not doing too much, just because this Queen is going to be able to push it away all day. So that's why you definitely want to start out with your Queens as soon as possible off of your hatcheries and get that going. Of course, you do want to get Zergling speed, which he has already accomplished, since he started the gas basically before his pool even started. So he's in really good shape right now, and he has to decide, okay, well, what's my next step to stopping the timing that I know is pretty much incoming every game from Terran. So it looks like he's going to start spreading his creep right away. You can see he's really diligent about that, and it looks like he's going to rely on Queens to stop this rather than Roaches or anything like that. Now as far as the Terran is concerned, again, they're just going to go for something that's going to try and stop that third base from getting too much done. It's going to be Hellion Banshee like in the first game. We're going to see it dealt with a lot better than the first time around. Some cloaks coming up. Here's that little walling technique that I was talking about before. If there get to be an overwhelming amount of Hellions, you can actually just move this Spine Crawler back right here and hold position on a Queen so that the Hellions have to take a ton of damage before they ever get in. Creep spread is continuing to go. I honestly just don't think he has enough Queens right now to deal with this, and you do want to connect these bases as well. So the one thing I have to fault him on is just that his queen count is a little too low for a timing like this. So here comes he's just pushing out the spine as far as he can. Now the creep is connected, so even if the Hellions run by, the queens will get there in just enough time. But we'll have to see if he makes any mistakes or what else he could have done better. I would really like to see another queen coming out of this hatchery just because he knows this little timing is coming. And the other side of this is, once again, I have to fault the Zerg for not scouting enough because he really doesn't know too much that's going on inside the base. If he did, he'd be able to see the starport here, but according to him, that still looks like a barracks, and this just looks like regular Hellion play. So you do want to follow up on that to see what you need to get done. Now in the meantime, he knows that the timing's coming out. He's going to try his best to rely on his queens and his spines to deal with that timing, but he's also going to counterattack while the Terran army is out on the map. So he's going to try and see what he can get. If he can't get too much, he can always just pull his links back. And that was a big problem right there. He just accidentally made a mistake of grouping all of his drones like this, not realizing that the Hellions were over here, which is again why you want to push your creep out as much as possible. But you can see he's starting to do this walling technique because he doesn't quite know what's going on. But this is going to be painful here. He's going to lose a fair amount of drones, I would say. Already lost 15. There's a Banshee in the main as well, killing a lot of drones, so you can see that if you just don't keep good containment on this, it can spiral out of control quite quickly. And then another huge hit from that, so that's a big problem as well. But the other thing is that he knows there's a bunch of stuff on the other side of the map killing him. So if that's the case, he has to do something to try and get even here. So he's going to try and break through this wall, going to try to get here and deal some damage because, especially with this Hellion Banshee opener, more than likely they're just not going to have a lot of stuff at home to deal with this. So he's going to try to break this down the best he can. He does have just one Baneling, and look at this Baneling hit. Just going to absolutely waste these SCVs. Blam, all of them are super red. Now the Zerglings can clean up. And now all of a sudden it looks like, well, I lost 21 workers, but let's see how fast I can even this out. So there you go. Now it's 21 workers killed to 17 workers, and in total, the Zerg is actually pretty far ahead. So if you want to try and mix in these little bit of counterattack plays, if you have a good understanding of where they are on the map, you can do so. But I would say this is the more advanced, by far, of the 3 replays we've looked at so far. And throughout the game, he's just going to send these little packs of Zerglings and see what he can get. If you're trading equally for harvesters in terms of cost, like let's say this is what, 16 Zerglings? Each of them costs 25 minerals. So you can figure that if he kills 8 workers with these Zerglings, then they have more than paid for themselves. And that's just going to be his whole goal throughout the course of this game. So we'll see how it works out. In the meantime, once again, getting Spire, which we can see is coming down right here. Getting his upgrades, which we can see are starting right here. And the Baneling Nest getting Baneling Speed. So this is pretty much the same idea as the previous game in terms of everything that he should be getting at whatever time. But the difference is that he's choosing a lot more aggressive route, rather than just staying passive and accepting the attacks. Banshees are getting a little bit out of control, so you do want to make sure you do have detection. There's the Overseer right there. The Queen's coming up. You're going to push this away without losing too much, maybe a couple of extra drones, but not the biggest of deals. Terran's going to try to take a third base, and once again, he tries to just come in here and see what he can get. If you can't get anything, just pull him right back. There's no harm done. Only lost 2 Zerglings, not a big deal. And then he does waste a bunch more accidentally. But, yeah, I mean, the whole theme of this replay is just going to be, let me see what I can get with little packs of units like this. And sometimes they'll do a lot of damage, and sometimes they won't. But if I can do it enough and wear him down, then that'll be a good win here. Now, because he knew where the army was with this pack of Zerglings, he knows that it's over here. He can actually just run by with a bunch of links into the main and see what he can get. And he's just going to try to pull them apart here. If he can bring the whole army back here, all of a sudden this base will be exposed, and that's what he's trying to do. So he comes in here, he's going to get at least 1 SCV. Okay, not even that, but still. It was a good idea. Mutas are now out, so you can see there's a lot more action going on and a lot more that you're going to have to pay attention to. Which is why I say this is more of an advanced style. This is more of, if you're already confident with your APM and your multitasking and injects and stuff, this is the kind of stuff that you can do. So, okay, now we're getting to the point where the Terran says, alright, I've had enough. I'm going to come out here and I'm going to try and waste you the best I can. Now, as Zerg, you can try continuing to counterattack because you know there's going to be nothing here. But at some point, you're going to have to face the music and fight this army. So whether you can fight that as efficiently as possible with these little Baneling groups, or whether you have to start and try forcing a base trade, that's kind of up to you. But obviously the best solution is just to get a little bit of damage done with your mutas and then send them back and reunite with your army to crush that. So in comes the mutas, trying to deal as much as they can. And look at this, just because he decided to do that, it actually pulled the entire Terran army back. And the Zerg knows about this because he saw it with this creep and stuff like that. So now all of a sudden the Terran has a huge problem on his hands because he decided to come back and deal with this. So that's another little important aspect that you could force. You could force him to walk all the way back, force him to lose a lot of workers, and basically get nothing done. So, and again, he's going to try and split this up as much as possible. You want to send in groups of Zerglings over here into the main, and then try to distract your army with the mutas. Just get his attention as many places as possible. So you can see everything starts to flock back in here. The Terran is starting to just get absolutely worn down by these little counterattacks, and the Zerg is not losing too much. In the meantime, Terran is just deciding, well, I'll just send about a home just enough to deal with this, and then I'll just send the rest of my army out to see what they can get done. But if we take a look at the Terran's vision, let's see where he's looking right now. He's actually looking back in his main, but the problem is that he has a big group of Marines right here that he's not paying attention to. And if that happens and he gets hit by banelings, it's going to be bad, bad news. So I think you all know what's coming, so let's just watch it happen. And there you go. Maybe 5 or 6 banelings to kill an entire pack of Marines. Very good trade. So yeah, at the end of the day, just because he decided to make that counterattack decision, and the Terran decided to come back. Now let's look at the situation report here. 40 worker lead for the Zerg. Almost a 50 supply lead. Actually, that is exactly 50 supply lead. And the Terran's really just in a bad spot right now. So you can see where these all start to add up. Let's just go ahead and kind of blow through this game a little bit and finish up this video. But the only other thing I want to say is just how you're going to close out the Terran player from here if you wind up getting an advantage like this. One thing I do have to fault him on a little bit is that he's not taking bases as aggressively as he could be. So this base should be fully mining pretty much by now, and he should be thinking about taking a 5th base. Again, another counterattack to see what he can get done. It doesn't do a whole lot, and one of the big problems with this style is that if you just make the wrong decisions or if you don't get good trades with your counterattacks, then you're probably just going to slowly die. So again, Muta's in the main, Zergling's running by to the natural, trying to get as much done as he can. Zerglings just walk right past, and this is really annoying for the Terran player to deal with. And again, another little downside from this is that eventually you're going to get to a point where either you make a mistake like that and lose a lot of mutas, or you're going to make a mistake at the point where you just waste too many units and he just walks across the map and kills you. So you need to be a little bit mindful of that as well. A couple of other cool things that he's doing. He does have burrow, so you can see little groups of banelings are being burrowed right here, just in case he decides to walk in this area. You can just manually detonate your banelings with this button right here. There's an explode button while they're burrowed, and you can just blow them up when they walk by. So that can feed into your counterattack strategy, but the other cool thing is that he has a Nidus coming up as well, just to aid him even more in getting counterattacks in there, so that his Zerglings, rather than having to run through here, can probably just go through the Nidus network and attack the main directly. So we will see some cool stuff here coming down from Starbuck and some different ways to deal with that. Or rather to get a victory condition here on the Terran. More Zerglings try to run by. These are starting to get less and less profitable, but now all of a sudden he can fly in with his mutas and drop a Nidus right here, basically whenever he wants. There we go. And the mutas are just going to be trying to distract a little bit. You can see the Terran doesn't actually know what's going on here, just because it's out of range. The mutas will just be trying to buy time. You can see the Terran army starting to move across the map here, so that's a problem he's going to have to deal with at some point. But he still will have enough for counterattacks, as he is loading just a handful of Zerglings in here. And the rest of it should be allocated decently to try and deal with this army. But this is at the point where the Terran's taken so much damage from these little counterattacks throughout the game that if he can just stop this one push, he should be in good shape. The Terran starts moving up here. There's once again where these mines are out here, and you don't want to waste too many banelings on those, so you just want to move small little groups. You can see he does have some more stuff around here, like there's some banelings here, there's some Zerglings here. His mutas aren't even with his army right now, they're over here. But if they do have mines, you do want to engage in small little packs of banelings and Zerglings like this, just so that the mines don't blow up everything and you just lose the game. So not getting the greatest trades with his banelings, but he does target trigger the Widow Mines to fire. The counterattack in the main doesn't do a ton, but at the same time it does force Terran to keep some stuff back there. At the same time, the damage has kind of already been done. He just needs to stop this attack. I'm on slow speed. So finally, he knows that the mines are pretty much cleaned up. He can come in here and surround this army and kind of squash it the best he can. The mutas will try to deal with the medevacs the best they possibly can. I don't know why I'm on slow again. But yeah, so you can see eventually it started to add up, and eventually got to a point where he just needs to be able to invest a small amount into stopping this. And from here, the transition is underway. 3-3 for the ground, chitinous plating for the Ultralists, and 4 Ultras on the way are pretty much going to end this game. And I know you want to see the one fight where Terran just loses the entire game, because that's what we want to see in videos like this. So we'll just go ahead and fast forward that just a little bit. You can see the mines are doing a little more than they should. Zerg needs to be a little bit careful about letting those do too much damage. Does have to cancel some banelings. Another mine here, getting another shot. But he should come crashing in here basically any second, knowing that the Terran is still only on 3 bases. I mean, you can see every base here. There's a birdling there. He actually took one of the Terran's bases just to kind of push him off of it. But if you keep these counterattacks up for long enough, now all of a sudden the Terran is barely mining. He has 2 mining bases, and both of them are about to mine out. And at that point, there's just no way he's going to get another base if the Zerg keeps the pressure on. So he's going to just keep going in with big groups of units like this and see what he can get done. These Marines are about the deadest Marines ever. At least if the army turns around and fights them. So here we go, surrounding from basically all sides. Zerg player is going to try to end this game here. And the one thing that we didn't see too much are the broad bailing hits, but I promise we'll see one here in just a second. They won't even really mean that much, but you can see the Zerg is just absolutely tearing the Terran player down. I choose to make these things difficult for myself. But okay, let's just pretend that this was earlier in the game. He burrows some banelings here. You want to try and bait the army into him as much as possible, because there's a good chance he just didn't see this, or if they're out on the map, there's a good chance that he never would scan and see him anyway. So I know this is kind of silly and the game's already over at this point, but this is kind of theoretical. If you can set up little traps out on the map like this and kind of bait the Terran into him, you can see that the 2 banelings will do exactly their job, which is blowing up Marines. So yeah, that'll pretty much end this game. I'll just go ahead and pause it here for you guys and jump back into my other screen. Now I hope that helped you guys out, and if you have any questions you can always post in the comments or whatever, and I'll do my best to get to answering them. But I hope this gives you guys a good idea of how ZvT is played at the highest levels and what you need to start looking out for in your own games. I'm going to try to start getting more videos out here for you. I'm going to shoot for 1 a week, and this is my 1 for this week, so yay, I've met my first goal right after I said it. And look out for more videos here. I think the next one I'm going to be doing is actually a TVP video, so if there's any Terran players watching for whatever reason, look out for that. But these are all organized into playlists for tutorials, so check out my other tutorials, and please check out my stream as well. I will be streaming some big-time tournaments here pretty soon, so look out for that. In the meantime, take care. See you later.